I can't get the image out of my head. A little 5-year-old standing in the cold, wearing his bright little blue bunny hat and his Spider-Man backpack, surrounded by federal agents. He was on his way home from preschool when Immigration and Customs Enforcement, ICE, or CBP, or whatever agency is running these things these days, took him and his father into custody. Now, this thing didn't look like law enforcement, not even a little bit. It looked like a huge mistake. The kind that shouldn't happen in a country that claims to care about children or due process, if those things mean anything now. When I posted the image of little Liam in my Instagram stories, other journalists I know from around the world couldn't believe their eyes. I can't blame them. One of them simply responded, "His name is Liam Conejo Ramos." Conejo actually means bunny in Spanish. And his family was lawfully in the United States. But what happened to him next triggered a legal battle that exposed just how far immigration enforcement is willing to go to violate the Constitution. You might say this is not immigration enforcement, not in the sense that we know it. This wasn't a mistake. It was real, and it was deliberate. ICE agents abducted Liam and his father by force and transported them more than 1,300 miles from their home in Minnesota to a detention facility in Dilley, Texas. Dilley, that notorious detention facility where children and parents do not have access to sufficient potable water or palatable food, where bright lights are left on 24 hours a day and officers threaten to separate families if they don't follow every order. I'll tell you more about Dilley later. But that's where they sent Liam and his father. Afterward, Marcos Charles, an acting executive associate director of ICE, told reporters that Liam's father tried to flee the authorities, effectively abandoning his child. His school said that ICE then tried to use him as bait to get at other people in the house. Supposedly, the mom was in there and ICE tried to get her too. ICE could have left them there. They could have exercised what is known as prosecutorial discretion. But instead, they took a preschooler to a detention camp. Once Liam and his father were taken to the South Texas Family Residential Center in Dilley, conditions inside were far from humane. Lawyers visiting the facility reported that detainees, many of them children, were confined for long stretches and lacked proper medical care. Immigration attorney Eric Lee, who witnessed demonstrations and spoke with families there, he witnessed distressing scenes of children and parents crying out from behind the fences.
I'm outside. It doesn't say out here.
And I've just been ordered to leave the premises. And she's yelling at me right now, so I'm gonna head back to my car and try and keep you abreast of the situation.
Watching the video of people screaming from inside a detention camp is chilling in a way that goes beyond words. Did you catch that? Some of them were yelling, "Libertad," freedom. This is the United States in 2026. Meanwhile, when Representative Joaquin Castro visited Liam, he said the boy wasn't doing well. He found it difficult to eat. He had a fever, and the jailers took away his hat and backpack, which he kept asking for. If being in jail takes a physical and psychological toll on adults, imagine the trauma it inflicts on children. No children should be in jail, ever. Liam and his father, Adrian, had already been through a lot. The family was in the United States lawfully, having entered the country to seek asylum. Now, asylum is a legal right, a process that allows people who fear persecution to request it and remain in the U.S. legally while their claims are reviewed and adjudicated by an immigration judge. According to Liam's mother, Erica, in December 2024, Liam and Adrian entered the United States through the CBP One border app. The app, which has been around for some time but blossomed during the Biden administration, is the process asylum seekers had to follow until Trump turned this app into literally a self-deportation tool. No, really, it's now called a CBP Home app, and they're not lying about its purpose. Check it out.
If you're an illegal alien living in the United States, this runway is your future. Because one way or another, you're getting on a plane home. But how you get there is up to you. I'm Kristi Noem, the United States Secretary of Homeland Security. You can make it easy, like others who've made the right choice, by downloading the CBP Home app and safely self-deporting. They received financial assistance up to $1,000. a free flight home, and they have the chance to come back to America legally. Or your trip home can be hard. We will find you. You will be fined thousands of dollars, detained, and forcefully removed from our country. Leave legally, because you won't miss this flight. And it's your last chance to get on board the right way.
At one point, people at a port of entry, they had to download the app, then schedule an appointment with the app. They presented themselves to U.S. authorities to begin the laborious asylum process. That gives them the legal status, so to speak, to remain in the country while the proceedings play out, often for years during the asylum process. Now, to be perfectly clear, the process wasn't perfect. Not at all. Biden limited asylum to a ports of entry, an asylum ban by another name, even though the asylum statute allows people to request it even if they cross the border elsewhere. That meant that the number of CBP-1 appointments was limited. So to answer the most common question I hear from conservatives, well, why didn't they just do it legally? Why didn't they get in the back of the line? Well, this family was following the legal process when ICE detained them. When ICE arrested Liam and Adrian, they were still waiting for their court date. There was no order of removal. So his lawyers turned to one of the oldest safeguards in American law, a petition for habeas corpus, which I like to call a petition for your own freedom. It literally means to have the body, habeas. Habeas allows a federal court to demand that the government justify why it is holding a person without apparent legal authority. This isn't a document that asks a court to predict whether someone might someday lose an immigration case or might someday commit a crime. It asks whether their confinement right now is lawful. It exists precisely to prevent the government from imprisoning people first and sorting out legality later. Habeas corpus is so fundamental to American law that it's in the Constitution. The privilege of the writ of habeas corpus shall not be suspended unless when in cases of rebellion or invasion, the public safety may require it. Notice the may. It is so fundamental, it's no surprise Kristi Noem, our distinguished Secretary of Homeland Security, infamously flunked the test when asked what the writ means.
So, Secretary Noem, what is habeas corpus?
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country.
Now, the government may not care about your rights or your privacy, but if you do, now is probably a good time to wipe all of your personal and private information off of the internet. Your cell phone number, home address, email address, private social media accounts, and tons of sensitive data are shockingly easy to purchase by anyone online. But malicious actors can't hurt you if they can't find you. And so you can fight back and take control of your private information by signing up for today's sponsor, Incogni. Because Incogni wipes your personal data from the internet by searching the internet, reaching out to data brokers and websites directly on your behalf, and forcing them to remove your private information. If they resist, Incogni will take care of that too, because Incogni fights back. But what makes Incogni truly powerful in taking back control of your privacy is the custom removals feature. It allows you to flag an unlimited number of sites where your data is exposed, and you can even have Incogni's privacy experts review and tackle the most uncooperative data brokers and search sites. Now, I've been using Incogni for years now, and in that time you can see I've been on hundreds of lists, some of which had a high sensitivity score, meaning the broker had tons of data on me. Luckily, Incogni has completed hundreds of takedowns for me in that time. Now, I could never do this myself, so thank you to Incogni for weeks worth of work and adding me to over 40 suppression lists. And Incogni will continue to conduct ongoing removals because even if the broker removes your data once, they can always collect it and publish it again. So if online privacy is important to you, give Incogni a try. If you scan the code on screen or click on the link in the description, you'll get 60% off their annual unlimited plan. Or try Incogni risk-free for 30 days. If you decide to keep it, you'll still get the 60% off discount so long as you use my code LegalEagle, all one word, at checkout. So sign up for Incogni or I'll see you in court.
On Saturday, Fred Byery, a federal judge in Texas's Western District, granted Liam's and his father's habeas petition. Judges have been granting a lot of habeas petitions lately, and Judge Byery sets the tone in the first paragraph in no uncertain terms. The case has its genesis in the ill-conceived and incompetently implemented government pursuit of daily deportation quotas, apparently even if it requires traumatizing children. This court and others regularly send undocumented people to prison and orders them deported, but do so by proper legal procedures. That phrase, ill-conceived and incompetently implemented, does a lot of work. Judge Byery is blunt about why this happened. A deportation quota system. Remember Stephen Miller? Yes, he set one. And he immediately contrasts the quota policy with what the Constitution requires. proper legal procedures. He goes on. Apparent also is the government's ignorance of an American historical document called the Declaration of Independence. 33-year-old Thomas Jefferson enumerated grievances against a would-be authoritarian king over our nascent nation. Among others were 1. He has sent hither swarms of officers to harass our people. 2. He has excited domestic insurrection among us. 3. For quartering large bodies of armed troops among us. 4. He has kept among us in times of peace standing armies without the consent of our legislatures. By the way, did you know that when the Declaration of Independence was written, there was no immigration law in the country? Anyway, that's another aside. There's nothing subtle about this. Judge Byrie is not the first person to notice that President Trump is repeating the grievances that set the Revolutionary War in motion. I actually have done that in my own articles. So let's go through it again, shall we? Swarms of officers? Check. Domestic insurrection? Check. Quartering large bodies of armed troops? Check. Standing armies without consent of the legislature? Check. That history is why the Constitution draws hard lines around government power, starting with the Fourth Amendment. Judge Byrie makes that connection explicit. We the people, he writes, are hearing echoes of that history. And then there's that pesky inconvenience called the Fourth Amendment. The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrants shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched, the persons or things to be seized. End quote. Civics lesson to the government. Administrative warrants issued by the executive branch to itself do not pass probable cause muster. End quote. To recap what we discussed in Devin's video about ICE's secret memo, in the immigration context, the difference between an administrative warrant and a judicial warrant is incredibly important. An administrative warrant is issued internally by the executive branch. That means it could be signed by an ICE or a DHS official. These documents don't get approved by a judge in the judicial branch. And no, immigration judges do not count. Immigration judges are part of the executive branch, not the judicial branch. By contrast, a judicial warrant is issued by a judge upon showing of probable cause. Devin already called out notable Yale law graduate Vice President J.D. Vance for making misleading claims about administrative warrants. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who is also a lawyer, has now echoed some of those claims. Judge Byrie's response is blunt. That is called a fox guarding the henhouse. The Constitution requires an independent judicial officer. That's the entire point of the separation of powers, to ensure no branch of government gets to police itself. Accordingly, the court finds that the Constitution of these United States trumps this administration's detention of petitioner Adrian Conejo Arias and his minor son, LCR, that's little Liam. The great writ and release from detention are granted, pursuant to the attached judgment, end quote. He used the words trumps, and that was no mistake. Certainly this was Judge Byrie's way of directly addressing the president, but also detects some mocking of Trump's style here. You've all seen the way Trump uses uppercase nouns seemingly at random when composing his Truth Social posts that are just enlightening the world at 6 a.m. in the morning. That was almost playful. But the judge then reminds us that this is serious business, and he is mad as hell. Observing human behavior confirms that for some among us, the perfidious lust for unbridled power and the imposition of cruelty in its quest know no bounds and are bereft of human decency. And the root of law be damned. That is reminiscent of this iconic moment by Army Counsel Joseph Welch to Senator Joseph McCarthy at the peak of McCarthyism, when even showing sympathy for communist or leftist causes or labor movements could ruin your life.
Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
Or even get you deported. Judge Byrie then offers a critique of the whole immigration system. Ultimately, petitioners may, because of the arcane United States immigration system, return to their home country involuntarily or by self-deportation. But that result should occur through a more orderly and humane policy than currently in place. If I listed all the ways in which immigration law is arcane, we'd be here for weeks. Basically, the immigration system is so difficult to navigate that lawyers require special training to even understand it. The same person may be entitled to a hearing, a bond, or release depending on whether they crossed between ports of entry or presented themselves at one, whether they were stopped within miles of the border or deep inside the country, and whether their case is classified as arriving, paroled, or present without admission. These technical labels, which are all in the law, can decide whether someone sleeps at home or in detention, whether a judge ever reviews their custody at all, and whether a child is treated as a person with rights. It's a maze of overlapping agencies and shifting rules and procedural hurdles that are impossible to successfully navigate without an attorney. And you get to do all this on your own without a right to a lawyer because one doesn't exist in the immigration system. You'll hear me say this a lot on this channel, but in our deportation regime, the process is the punishment. In short, just about everyone agrees that the system is, in the judge's words, arcane. I would say that's possibly underselling it. I've never met anyone who says, "Yay, this is a great system, I love it." Anyway, Judge Byrie ends his order like this. Philadelphia, September 17, 1787. Well, Dr. Franklin, what do we have? And his response, a republic, if you can keep it. The remark remains relevant all these years later because it captures a core truth about the American system. The Constitution does not enforce itself. It's just words on paper. And courts cannot enforce those words without people willing to abide by the law. A republic survives only if the people and their elected representatives actively uphold its norms, limits, and institutions. Something as simple as obeying court orders, which is not happening in the District of Minnesota these days. Judge Byrie might not have said the same words as Ben Franklin, but the lesson is the same. The judge quoted it here to focus our attention on the possibility that if we do not change course, perhaps by having the other two branches of the government respect the rule of law, the republic won't last another 250 years. Finally, the judge says, quote, "With a judicial finger in the constitutional dike, it is so ordered." Now, the reference to the constitutional dike might be lost on some people. The judge was invoking the famous image from a novel called Hans Brinker, or The Silver Skates, where a child holds back a flood after the systems meant to protect the community had failed. The point of the metaphor is not really that one small act can solve a massive problem. It's more like this particular small act, this order, should not have been necessary in the first place. Yes, this order prevents immediate harm and is of great consequence to Liam and his entire family, but it does nothing to stop the government from continuing down this path. The judge is condemning the institutional failure that allowed things to get to this point at all. Judge Byrie then did something truly extraordinary. I personally never seen anything like it in a judicial opinion. He attached a famous photo of little Liam being detained by ICE agents, the same photo that moved the entire world. And under that, references to two Bible verses, Matthew 19:14 and John 11:35. The Matthew verse says, "But Jesus said, Suffer little children, and forbid them not to come unto me, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." The John reference is actually the shortest verse in the entire Bible, and it is to the words, "Jesus wept." What Judge Byrie's ruling does not do is end the practice of detaining families or children. It does not close the detention center in Dilley. Dilley remains a hellhole for migrant children and their families. Don't take it from me. Take it from Elora Mukherjee, an immigrant rights lawyer who has represented families in detention at Dilley for years. Not a single one of them should be in detention. They should all be free, like Liam and his dad. Here's how she describes it. Children and parents consistently report not having access to sufficient potable water, palatable food. Both children and parents have told me they found worms in their meals, adequate medical care or meaningful educational opportunities. Lights are left on 24 hours a day, making it difficult to sleep. Officers have repeatedly threatened to separate families, including those I represent. She continues, many of the children detained at Dilley have been living in the United States for years before they were apprehended and taken to Texas. I have encountered the stories of 3 high school students from Detroit. Curly Sosa Rivero dreamed of going to college. Anthony Peña Sosa, a violin player, excelled in an advanced placement art course. Santiago Zamora Perez, a star baseball player with excellent grades, hoped to play in college. Then there's the stories of a 7-year-old second grader from Winooski, Vermont, taken apparently with his mother and a set of siblings ages 12 and 15, arrested on their way to school in Durango, Colorado. One family that had been living in the United States for a decade was detained at Dilley. Their children had just completed elementary school. One of my clients, the 6-year-old Maria Paola, a first grader living in New York City, showed up at her ICE check-in in her school uniform. Now, Judge Byerly's court order does not bar ICE from continuing to abduct children and their parents. Liam was released because his lawyers were able to get a federal judge to intervene in time. His picture went around the world, and so a GoFundMe was organized, and this helped the family with critical resources at a crucial time. For countless other families, no such intervention ever comes. But judges across the country share Judge Byerly's outrage over this blatant disregard of human rights. The administration's broader escalation in selective immigration enforcement, Minnesota gets a 3,000 agent crackdown, but other states don't, is creating huge problems within the system. Federal judges in multiple districts have openly rebuked ICE and the Department of Justice for repeatedly violating or ignoring judicial orders in immigration cases, including directives to grant bond hearings or release detainees, provide timely responses, or comply with basic procedural deadlines. One judge in Minnesota found that ICE likely violated more court orders in January 2026 alone than some federal agencies have violated in their entire histories. He warned that his patience was at an end and even threatened to hold the agency's top official in contempt. Other federal jurists have condemned government attorneys for misleading the courts or failing to comply with rulings, with immigration-related matters making up a majority of instances where judges said the administration misrepresented facts or ignored orders. But rounding up families and kids to meet Stephen Miller's quotas is moving faster than lawyers, judges, and court orders can keep up with. In most areas of civil law, routine compliance with court orders is not optional. It is the baseline expectation, rock bottom. When agencies miss deadlines, ignore rulings, or misrepresent facts, judges can impose sanctions, hold officials in contempt, or shut cases down entirely. Immigration enforcement, however, has increasingly operated outside those norms, and the system breakdown is no longer abstract. It surfaced this week when a Justice Department attorney was pressed by a federal judge on why so many court orders were being ignored in immigration cases. The attorney then openly acknowledged the strain. She reportedly said, quote, "The system sucks. This job sucks," and even asked to be held in contempt simply so she could get 24 hours of sleep. That's how bad it is. She's literally putting her license to practice law on the line because of how inhumane the system is, even for government lawyers. Court records show that since the start of Operation Metro Search, she has been assigned to defend the government in more than 88 immigration cases at once. Now, I'm not asking you to cry for DOJ lawyers, but remember, most of these lawyers are not political appointees. They're career prosecutors being ordered to carry out the wishes of political appointees, even when those directives conflict with the rules of professional conduct or their own moral sense of right and wrong. This is why the DOJ is losing prosecutors at an alarming rate. When I recorded this video, at least 14 prosecutors resigned from the U.S. Attorney's Office in Minnesota. That is, as a result of Operation Metro Search, Trump has effectively destroyed a U.S. Attorney's Office covering an entire state. Things are so dire, the administration is recruiting on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call that thing. And of course, they couldn't even get that right. Chad Mazzell, Pam Bondi's former chief of staff, asked for lawyers to contact him through a direct message, but his DMs were initially turned off. Also, his announcement said that any lawyers interested in supporting President Trump should contact them. But did you know that the federal government cannot hire or fire career attorneys on the basis of partisan affiliation? We had a whole scandal back in the quaint George W. Bush days about politicized DOJ hiring. The reason for that is simple. Prosecutors hold a lot of power over people's lives and liberty. And you can't have lawyers threatening people's lives and liberty based on who they voted for or whom they support. DOJ lawyers swear an oath to the Constitution, not to a president or a political agenda. Also, there's this little thing called the Civil Service Reform Act that sets out standards for how people should be hired without regard to politics. It's fun to have a few laughs about this, but it's truly shocking how far the DOJ has fallen in the space of a year. Assistant U.S. attorneys' jobs used to be among the most prestigious legal positions in American law. But now, the top Justice Department roles are literally filled by the president's personal lawyers. Pam Bondi, Todd Blanche, Emil Bovee at one point, John Sauer, the Solicitor General. We've never seen such a personalized Justice Department staffed with personal lawyers. Now, I'm not gonna lie, when I first saw the court order by Judge Byrie ordering the release of little Liam, I was encouraged by it, but I was not surprised. And that's in part because Judge Byrie is known for his colorful language. If you go to my Blue Sky account, my banner image is actually a court order by him from last year that I found funny. Not for its substance, although you should probably read that too, but for how he signed off the order. Here's what I shared last year. I'll read it to you. For those who disagree with the court's decision and who would do so with threats, vulgarities, and violence, grace and peace unto you. May humankind of all faiths, beliefs, and non-beliefs be reconciled one to another. And about the people that are being harmed and terrorized by it. Just because right before Trump came back into power, they decided to seek refuge in the US, like Liam and his father. That Liam sought protection of our laws in December 2024. In Spanish language interviews, Liam's mother, Erica, described watching the arrest unfold from inside her home, frozen with fear as ICE agents took her husband and young son away. That Liam sought the protection of our laws in 2024 is something to be proud of. In Spanish language interviews, Liam's mother, Erica, described watching the arrest unfold from inside her home, frozen with fear as ICE agents took her husband and young son away. She said she was afraid to open the door, afraid she too would be detained, and afraid of being separated from her other children. In the days that followed, she went into hiding not because she had committed any crime, but because she feared further enforcement actions against her family. Now that Liam is free and the family reunited, let his picture in the bunny ears and the Spider-Man backpack be what many of us take from this whole ordeal. And may this kind of injustice never, ever happen again.
Now, all this highlights why it's so important to get a great lawyer when you're dealing with your own case. Now, after I started this channel, every week I'd get hundreds of comments and emails from viewers who are dealing with legal problems. And they'd ask, can you help me find a lawyer? How do I know if this attorney is any good? And there's a massive gap in our justice system. It's that people don't know how to find the right lawyer for their specific situation. They're scared, they're overwhelmed, and they end up doing nothing or hiring the first attorney who calls them back. And that really bothered me. So I started to wonder, what if there was a different way? What if we could build a law firm that actually lived up to the values that I talk about on this channel? Transparency, accessibility, and putting clients first instead of chasing billable hours. A firm where you don't need to pay anything up front, and your lawyers only get paid if you do to maximize your opportunity for justice. So a few years ago, I decided to fix that problem. I decided to start my own personal injury law firm. And honestly, it wasn't an easy choice. But I realized I was in this unique position. I had this platform, this community, and the experience. Not to get rich, trust me, there are easier ways to make money than starting a law practice. But we did it because access to justice shouldn't be a luxury. Because finding the right legal representation shouldn't feel like playing Russian roulette with your future. And when you work with my firm, you're not just getting a lawyer. You're getting a team that understands that behind every case is a real person with real stakes. If we can't represent you or you're in a state where we don't practice, we'll take the time to try to match you with an attorney in my personal network of lawyers. A national network of some of the best lawyers in the country who actually specialize in what you're going through, located right where you are, not just whoever happens to be available. So if you're dealing with a personal injury, a car crash, a data breach, sexual harassment, a social security or workers' comp issue, give us a call at the number on screen or click on the link below. Now, I can't represent everyone that watches this channel. I wish I could, but what I can do is make sure that when you need legal help, you have somewhere to turn to that you can trust. So whether it's me handling your case or the incredible attorneys we partnered with, you'll get the same principles of honesty and education that we bring to every video. And if you're dealing with a legal issue and you're not sure where to start, check out the link in the description. Let's have a conversation about how we can help you find not just a lawyer, but the right lawyer for your situation. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about, making sure that when life gets complicated, you don't have to face it alone. Which is why when you need a lawyer, you don't just need a legal team, you need the Eagle team.